Welcome to the Emerging Tech Unpacked podcast. I'm your host, Lucy Lin. This is part 2 of our generative AI topic, and if you haven't yet watched or heard the first part, please go back to the generative AI overview episode as an introduction. In this episode, we'll be further unpacking the Gen AI topic, and I'm really excited to be interviewing a woman in STEM leader here today. We have the amazing Nilram Azadpeyma, who is a machine learning cloud engineer at Google. Hi, Niram. How are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Lucy. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, we just had a quick chat about yourself, and I think you're an extraordinary person. But we'd love to hear your background as well and what you do in the generative AI space.
Sure. So I actually come from a networking and telecommunications background. That's what I did at university. Over time, I kind of started doing different jobs and I've kind of changed the field that I'm focused on. Nowadays, I'm a machine learning customer engineer and I have done a lot of generative AI talks this year just because it became such a hot topic. And, I got the opportunity to learn a lot about it and also communicate that to the broader audience. A lot of people wanted to learn about it, so I took that opportunity. And it's been such an interesting year because it was a new set of technologies, and I had the opportunity to learn that as it was coming out. It's been quite interesting to watch.
Yeah. I was at South by Southwest Sydney, and I spoke about AI and storytelling as part of the New South Wales House. And but all the other sessions, and I think there was about 600 sessions in 2023, every single topic discussed about AI. There was some kind of artificial intelligence, and I think majority of them was all about generative AI because it affects so much in music, in screens, in tech, and in innovation. So as a machine learning cloud engineer, can you let us know how does generative AI actually learn and create content? And then maybe give us a very easy to understand method, how the underlying technologies and algorithms actually work.
Sure. So, generative AI has become generative AI this year, the way we all know it. However, large language models that enable generative AI have been around for a little while now. Maybe even over a decade, that different people across the industry have been working on large language models. And the way the large language models work is kind of similar to any other machine learning model. So you have this corpus of data, you train a model, you evaluate it, you take it to production. It's just a very similar pipeline, except that we are talking about massive models here. So when we talk about a large language model, we are talking about billions of parameters. So that's why we call them large language models. And they're capable of doing a whole bunch of different capabilities, from content generation all the way to some of the machine learning use cases that we have traditionally done using smaller models, such as segmentation as an example. And the great thing about large language models is that they're really good at picking up patterns because of how much data they have been trained on. Usually they have been trained on generic use cases. So they would have been trained across different industries and different type of use cases across the board. And we kind of pick branches of these large language models as well to get them to be a little bit more specialized than to a specific task that we want them to take on. So that's what really powers generative AI and the way we know it today. Now, large language models, like I said, have been around for a little while. There was a point in time because of the scale that we were looking at and the type of infrastructure requirements that we have had for large language models that we had a tipping point as an industry. So we got to a point that we learned how to scale large language models in the most optimal manner. And that was when a transformer architecture came out. So a lot of people have heard of GPT. T in GPT stands for transformer. That happened in 2017 when a transformer architecture came out. And then people became a lot more eager on large language models and they started taking some of them to production. So For example, if you've been chatting to a chatbot, there's a good chance you're already using a large language model and you've been doing that for a couple of years. It's just that we didn't call it Gen AI back then and it wasn't as big. But now Gen AI is Gen AI. It's a new era. So everyone is a little bit more focused on it.
Yeah, no, thanks for that background. I mean, I think it's very valuable to understand how that all works. Um, so we talked about this, like it's ChatGPT came out of nowhere about a year ago, and now every single person is using it to answer every single question, do so much background research. Some of it not true because there's a few misleading information in there. But why do you think AI has had such a quick adoption? Feels like, the last year it's just been so fast at developing. Gen AI has just come out of nowhere. So can you tell us a little bit more about its quick and vast adoption?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I think it was around a year ago or just under that when my customers started asking me about generative AI. And back then, it wasn't really a big topic, but it grew really fast. And I guess one of the main reasons for that was that it was put in the hands of the consumers, which made it really big. And it also made it a little bit easier for people to use machine learning and AI. So you didn't really have to be a machine learning engineer to be able to use large language models anymore. You could just jump on a tool, whether it's a consumer tool or whether it's an enterprise tool, and start using generative AI. It made it a lot easier to just enter the world of AI and machine learning. And as a result, it started making people more productive as well. So it became more and more popular over time. And you're right, there are some challenges with large language models, which is not exactly new. We have known about them for years. For example, hallucination is the most common one that people talk about. But it's something that we have known for years because large language models work with probability. So, there's a chance the probability is high on something that may not be factual. But it has become the next generation of productivity tools that a lot of people are using these days.
Yeah. I work a lot with startup founders and teams, and I've just found that people with very small teams is actually able to make a lot of big outputs. And I think that's one of the most positive things about generative AI and AI in general, because you can create a lot of content. As an example, I'm in marketing with help from content creations to video production to image generation, etc., very quickly. So I think smaller, leaner teams can actually produce so much more because of the productivity of AI and new AI tools. Do you think that these tools is going to continue the way it is, or do you feel like every emerging technology is on a bit of a hype cycle, I would say, and it's lots of new technology come and go. Do you think generative AI is now too hyped? Because it is it feels like we're in a very hyped situation right now. Do you think it's justified, or do you think it's actually going to pop at some point?
Great question. I can see two aspects to it. The first one is that I could see very early on that people were dubious whether they should spend time and energy on generative AI or not, because they weren't too sure whether it's just a hype, it's a bubble, or whether it's something that's here to stay. But now, a year after, we can see as an industry how far we have come, how much new technologies have been introduced, and we can already see people taking these use cases to production, which is a sign to me that generative AI is here to stay and is going to change the way we are working and the way we are using technology. No matter what we are doing, whether we are an engineer who wants to go really deep, or whether we are someone who wants to use these technologies out of the box, everyone is looking at the different problems a little bit differently. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is that what I do see a lot of is that people are treating generative AI as a tool that is going to solve all of the problems. So I kind of try to remind people that, not everything is going to be solved by generative AI, and sometimes we need to qualify and educate each other on what use case is perfect for large language models and which one may not be. Maybe just a couple of lines of Python will do what you want. You don't need generative AI for that necessarily. But I do think generative AI is here to stay.
Okay, that's good. Um, it's funny you talk about these potential use cases because I do feel that people are using it for everything these days, and sometimes it's not needed. But a lot of all the tools that I've seen all have an AI component in it now.
Yeah.
And have you seen some examples that you think have been really good use cases that you think is, yep, they've got it. This is what generative AI is actually used for. That you've experienced yourself or seen?
Yeah. So firstly, just like us, everybody else who has a product in the market has started thinking about how generative AI could add a bit to their application. So we are seeing more of AI helpers on different applications that we have. So that's one thing. The other side is that you see these use cases that are live, and some of them are quite exciting. So, for example, I think I saw Canva go live a couple of weeks ago with a generative AI use case
Mm,
where they're using image captioning as an example. And given that that's in the hands of millions of people and is making them more productive, that's very exciting to see. And it's quite interesting to see how they grabbed this opportunity and they brought it to production as one of the early adopters in the market.
mm.
I see a lot of different use cases that people are considering, but not everyone is bold enough to go and make it happen. But Canva did. I think that was one of the best ones I had seen so far.
Yeah, I use Canva every day for content and image, and they've done amazing things. You can do like background removal, you can have, um, yeah, there's like language translations, you can have just instant things where you delete and then you can just add to it straight away. There's so many
Yeah,
things that there's a whole suite, part of their Magic Studio suite, I believe that's called. Um,
yes.
I definitely would like to go in and play around with a lot of all those tools. Is there any other tools that you think has been quite good in terms of from a maybe even from a diverse perspective?
Yeah. Um, so one of the ways I think generative AI is helping everyone is that it's making technology a little bit more accessible. No
Mm,
matter what language you speak, where you're from, where you're located, it's kind of giving you an opportunity to do things differently. So, for example, on all of the collaboration applications that we are using, now we get an opportunity to be a little bit more productive in the way we are doing things. So, for example, if I'm writing a summary to you, Lucy, I can do that a lot quicker using a generative AI tool and kind of editing it myself
mm,
later on.
mm.
I feel like the collaboration side of things that generative AI is introducing brings the barrier a little bit lower for everyone to collaborate a little bit easier,
Mm.
whether it's someone who's very, outspoken or whether it's someone who might want to keep to themselves. And I see that collaboration side of generative AI being a very inclusive side of it as well, that is helping people do a little bit more with what they're doing already.
Yeah, nice. I like that. Yeah, I think there's so many use cases and so different ways to use it, and I don't think a lot of people are using it to the max properly because there's so many different ways. Um, Now, there's a lot of pros and cons to the debates of using generative AI, and I feel like the media gives us one perspective and the companies give us another. And you're a cloud engineer. Like, is there something that the mainstream media is missing and telling us? And what do you think that is, like, that we need to know more about generative AI?
Mhm. So one thing that I see a lot of is that everyone thinks about generative AI as a tool to generate content, whether it's text, images, or whatever it is.
Mm,
And yes, that's one of the main use cases of generative AI, but large language models can do a lot more. So a lot of the traditional machine learning use cases, I can't believe that we can say that now, but a lot of the traditional machine learning use cases that we used to do and we used to build models for, you can do with large language models. So I feel like a part of the community that is being exposed to generative AI is kind of missing the boat on being able to do a lot of other tasks using large language models. So segmentation, classification are a couple of examples of how you could use large language models. Again, because they're really good at picking up patterns, they could be really good at taking out these tasks as well. So
Great.
I feel like that's something that not a lot of people are thinking about. They're mainly focused on that content generation side, but
Yeah.
there's a lot more we could do with them. And you kind of want to go one step further. We have learned that piece, that content generation piece.
Yeah.
We know what the patterns are. We know how to use that in different use cases. But how do you go outside that boundary and think outside the box? I think that's one of the challenges I see out there. And I think it would be great if we could think outside that box, all of
Yeah.
us.
I'd love to unpack that a little bit more. So what do you mean by segmentation? Maybe even personalization? Like how can we use large language models better for maybe
Yeah,
segmentation?
sure. So a very common use case that a lot of people who deal with clients of theirs would deal with is that I might have a whole bunch of different customers. And my strategy of marketing my product to them, as an example, could be different depending on what type of customer I have in front of me. So one of the things you could do is to use the large language models to put your customers into different segments based on the specific patterns that you will introduce, and say that if I have a customer that is showing these specific behaviors, these are the type of marketing next steps that I want to take based on that. So doing customer segmentation becomes a lot easier than what it would have been before. In the past, you would have had to build a machine learning model, and that's something that we have a lot of experience in. So I'm not saying that it's hard, but it's easier using large language models these days. So that's an example of it. It's not content generation. It's more about understanding your customers better. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that leads into more personalization as well, right? Like how like so now you've segmented your customers in a more efficient way. How will personalization be part of that, you think, as the next step?
Yeah. So you will find different aspects of your customers, and you would say that segment one is showing that they have taken this long between their previous purchase to this purchase. And so based on that, the marketing message that I want to send out to them would be different to someone who is shopping on a daily basis, as an example. So you're kind of, like you say, you're specifying and customizing how you're reaching out to your customers. And it's like the next natural evolution of how you would be doing that today. And again, it's something that large language models could be used for that perhaps not a lot of people are actively working on it right now.
Yeah. Is it going to make me choose my Netflix selections a lot easier in terms of what I want to watch? Like, you know.
Surely that could be one of the use cases.
I struggle with, what to watch. There's so much options.
Yeah.
Would that also help a lot more? Because I know that humans prefer to have not as much options. Like, so as part of my MBA, when I was going through, one of my favorite books is The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz, and he talks a lot about how humans are overwhelmed with too much choice, really. And do you think personalization is actually one aspect that we can use better, and so there's less choice and it's more tailored to me? But does that mean that everything I see now is just I'm in my own bubble again? Like, I guess there's pros and cons to that. What are your opinions about that?
I guess one of the challenges that we all have in different parts of our lives, whether it's personal or professional, is around getting to the content we are looking for quicker.
Mm,
So whether that's, scrolling through Instagram, or whether that's going through a list of movies that I want to watch, or whether it's the right course that I want to take on.
mm,
And like for you to be able to get the right suggestions based on the similarities between what you have enjoyed or liked in the past is something that will make it easier for you to get there a little bit quicker as well. And that will make it a little bit, more natural for you as well. I have really enjoyed this course and I want to do something new, but I don't want to go and explore all of the courses that are available on even one platform. There's just too many of them. So how do
mm.
I get similar choices based on, again, another use case of large language models where you're looking for similarities between different nodes that are available?
Mm. Okay. Wow. So many things.
Mm.
Is there, what are the recent new developments or breakthroughs that you've seen from generative AI that's coming out or has come out that you think would be great to highlight besides
Mm.
segmentation and personalization, you say?
So one of the most interesting advancements that we started watching at the beginning of this year was how you would enable large language models to go a little bit further. So large language models are great as they are, but how do you give them arms and legs? How do you give them a little bit more power to take an action, or maybe give them a little bit more power to look for an answer if they can't find the right answer? So maybe if you want them to go and do a Google search, as an example, if they don't have the perfect answer. And that idea of being able to extend the capabilities of large language models have been explored a lot this year. There are already a couple of open source and maybe first party solutions that have been developed to make that happen. I think that is awesome to watch. And also, what a lot of people think about is that how could I ground what generative AI is doing into where my knowledge is sitting? So
Mm,
that grounding type of experience, grounding type of capability is a new technology. I wouldn't say technology, a new capability that a lot of people across the industry are working on. Some of it is already out there for people to use. That is kind of a natural next step for where we are at. We have learned how to work with large language models now. We
mm,
understand what they are. A lot of people have experienced it. Now, how could I ground it into my data? And, in a lot of cases, enterprises care about where their data is and, what type of learnings is going to come out of their data. So that grounding in a secure way is a new um, a new way of giving large language models arms and legs, but doing it in a way that everyone is comfortable with. So
mm,
these two are some that I think are going to be quite important in the way we are going to use large language models. Obviously, there is more. I mean, we already talked about the transformer architecture and why that was groundbreaking. Um, but there are more ways we are going to get large language models to be useful and helpful
mm.
in our environments.
Yeah, it sounds like it's back to personalization again, but from a now into a enterprise, like and using your own data or company's own data
Yeah.
versus just a generic one. So how does one go about that? Like is this going to be is it going to be new skills from each company? Like are we going to be developing a lot more new people needing to go into this space or do they already have the skills that they already have? Is it difficult? I guess what I'd like to know is that next step. Like how much more learnings do we need to accumulate as part of this?
So the great thing about generative AI is that even though it has had a lot of experience and history, right now we are at a point that we have watched a lot happen in just one year. So you have an
Mm,
opportunity to learn it kind of from scratch, but be really good at it because there isn't that much of a history. So when you look at networking industry, that has like 40 years, 30 years of history behind it. So it's a lot harder to learn all of that and understand where the steps were. Whereas when it comes to generative AI, it has a little bit of a shorter history. So you kind of can see why certain choices were made, why certain selections were made, which is something I found very useful because I could understand why we are taking the path that we are taking as an industry. I think a lot of the skills that people will need are quite easy to acquire. You just need to spend a little bit of time to and go through some of the basics of large language models and also understand new concepts that are being introduced, such as prompt engineering. I don't think they are hard for anyone to pick up, which is the great thing about generative AI. You can become an expert in it in a fairly short amount of time compared to other technologies. So I think this is a window of opportunity for a lot of us to take on a new challenge and see where we go with it. I think the future is going to be very interesting in the area of generative AI.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that you think it's actually a short learning curve by the sounds of it. I was like, wow, I thought it would be a long learning curve. I mean, you've come from being a network engineer and then you moved into this cloud engineering space. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how you pivoted. Like, how long did it take you to do that? Was it a long time? Was it a short time? This is still a very new space, as you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I kind of changed the specialization that I had, it was kind of a lot to learn. And I started learning from the data analytics side first. Then I progressed that into machine learning, which is kind of a natural progression from data analytics to machine learning. And then from there, I've been focusing a lot on generative AI. To begin with, I felt like it was such a new world to learn from. So at the beginning, I had to go through a lot of basics that perhaps a lot of other people in my current industry would have known about. So that was a little bit tough, especially when you come from another space where you're already kind of okay at what you're doing. That took a little bit of mental strength, I would say. But now, when I look back to 4 or 5 years ago, I'm very glad I made that pivot. And, I'm in such an interesting area right now where I really enjoy learning about everything that I'm doing right now. So it was an interesting change. It was a very big change, but I guess now I know and I've proven to myself that anytime you want to learn something new, you can do it. It's just a matter of putting the right time and energy in and being focused. So that was the story behind that.
Yeah, nice. And what made you want to change into this direction?
Um, Back in the day, I had a lot of my customers talking to me about cloud, and I felt like cloud was an area that there was a lot of focus on in IT in general. And I felt like at some point in my career, I will have to learn about cloud. So maybe that time could be now while I'm kind of fresh and I still have a lot of time on my hands to learn something new. So I made that change because I saw how much interest was there in the market about cloud.
Right, okay. Well, I think it's paid dividends. It sounds great.
Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear more about your experience and your background. I mean, you've had career changes. I know, Niram, that you're a global citizen, that you grew up in Iran and you've lived in Singapore and now you're in Australia. What has your experience been, also pivoting from, a network engineer to a cloud engineer? So many things. Has it been easy from that global perspective as well?
I think at any point in time when I was making those changes, at that point, it felt like the hardest thing to do ever But once you go past that hurdle, everything becomes easier. You look back and you kind of feel proud of yourself for having made those changes. And I think we were talking about it earlier as well. The resilience I've built because of all of those changes that I have made in my life has made me a stronger person. I have a tough skin these days. So I immigrated once from Iran to Australia, which was at the beginning a little bit hard for me, away from family and everything. After a couple of years, at the beginning of my career, I went to Singapore for a year. So that felt to me that I was immigrating yet again. Once I had built that circle around me, I was leaving that and going into another country and doing it all over again. So that took a little bit of mental health, mental strength as well. But the fact that I was exposed to different cultures, different types of working, different people with different mindsets has made me very flexible. So it has made me understand other people a little bit better and given me an opportunity to learn from different people from different backgrounds as well. We always talk about how diverse teams could achieve significant milestones. I think the fact that I've been able to be in different parts of the world and learn from them has been amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you talked about resiliency as well. Can you maybe unpack that a little bit more? Like, what made you more resilient in this, like, all these, in the amount of changes that you've experienced? Like, what were some of the tips and advice that you took on board to make you more mentally strong?
Yeah. So every time I made a change, it kind of took a toll on me because I've always been someone who has suffered from imposter syndrome. So every time I went through these changes, at the beginning, I felt like, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to build a new life in a new country? Am I going to be able to build another career once I've already done it? Am I going to be successful? Am I going to do okay? So all of those questions have always come to my mind at the beginning of those journeys. But now, after all these years and all these experiences, I now feel like I have proven that to myself. And next time I want to make a change, I'm more confident in the fact that I'm going to make it. It's just a matter of hard work and being able to focus, and I will be able to be okay. I will be fine, and I will just get more out of my life. So I feel like that has made me more resilient and more confident in who I am as a person as well. And I've come to know things about myself that I didn't know before. And I always thought I was very dependent on a lot of people around me, a lot of supporters around me. But then I've got to a point that I understand that I support a lot of people around me, and that kind of goes around as well. A lot of people try to support me, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because from the outside, it's like, oh, Niram is like a Google AI engineer, she doesn't have imposter syndrome. And then here you are talking about it. I was like, what? What is imposter syndrome? Because I lead a diverse founders program for a university, and I feel like women do talk a bit about lack of confidence and the imposter syndrome. And it's something that I really would love to help people with, like, why is it? And I do feel that a lot more women feel they have imposter syndrome and a lack of confidence. What are some of your tips to get over that imposter syndrome or that feeling of lack of confidence? Would you advise others on?
Yeah, I don't know if I've still made it to the other side to be able to.
I think on the outside you look okay.
But what I can say is that I kind of had to experience it for myself to get to a point that I know that everything is in my own head, and there is a famous saying that, the only limitation is the one in your own mind. I have come to realize that just by experience. I would have heard about this, a million times and it wouldn't have made an impact. But now I know that, we are all very capable people, all of us across this planet. As soon as we decide that we want to put our mind and time into something, we're going to be able to achieve it. And I mean, it's just a matter of being able to put the right focus on the right things and make the right choices with our times. Um, I think that has helped me now to understand that I just need to make the right choices and I have to say no to the right things to be able to focus, and then I will be able to achieve what I need to achieve or what I think I should achieve. And a lot of the things that I would have thought about, and maybe I still think about them, are only in my head. They are not
Yeah.
true. That's what I think, and it could be just a limitation in my own head that I need to overcome. Again, I hope this resonates with some people. I hope they think about it differently when they hear this. But for me, I had to go through it myself multiple times before I proved to myself that, it's just your head. Don't think about that. Move forward, one step at a time.
Mm. It's really all about mindset, isn't it? And then changing that mindset. You talked a bit about support, and I think the support probably helped with your mindset too. How important is it to have that support, and how do you actually get that support?
Um, wow, that is a great question. I have been very lucky with amazing mentors and coaches that I've had over the years.
Mm.
And especially at the beginning of my career, or even when I was immigrating, I had those supporters and those mentors who believed in me before I believed in myself. And they really helped me go one step further than what I thought I could have done.
Mm.
So the fact that I've had those people around me really helped me think outside the box, and outside the box that we were thinking about earlier. I'm I may not exactly be an extrovert, but I take the energy to go and look for mentors. So at any point in time, I have mentors where I am working outside in the industry, and I also have mentors, for my life as well. I think there is something to learn from everyone, and
Mm.
especially some people are amazing in guiding you through tough challenges. And I think just being vocal and asking people to help you goes a long way.
Mm.
That's one thing I'm never shy about. I go out and I ask people to be my mentor, and worst case they will say no. I've never had someone say no.
Yeah. That's my motto as well. If you don't ask, you don't know. So that's why you
Absolutely.
always ask, like, because you just don't know what people will say. And it's great to hear that you ask people to be a mentor and they say yes, because that's fantastic. Yeah, I think I probably need to be a little bit more brave and do that too. Um, so you're a very I love hearing all about your experience as a diverse expert. Like you grew up in Iran. Was it hard to kind of do you see that difficulty to as a woman, maybe as someone who's also from a multicultural background, to kind of get into this like very emerging new tech space? I know that it's a bit of a boys' club sometimes, and has it been like that for you, or have you heard any other stories like that?
Mhm. So I feel like, again, because of the new era that we are in, and because the bar to entry is a little bit lower than usual, it has opened up to a lot more people who may
Mm,
or may not have imposter syndrome, who may or may not be confident in themselves. And you see all of these amazing people come out of how they are learning about new technologies and how they're confident in talking about them, which is amazing to see. I have a couple of those around me as well.
mm,
Um, I do get challenged with a little bit of a diversity challenge in my industry as a female engineer. Perhaps you know, every now and then. And you always hear things that you feel like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything wrong, but it's just not great to say. It's the fact that sometimes people assume that I cannot be an engineer and I should be in another role. Those are all of the type of things that you hear about. I'm sure there are a lot of women out there who would get challenged on the same things. We're all moving forward. We're making this industry a little bit better. And I think with the new set of technologies that people are learning from, given that it has opened the floodgates of AI to a lot more people, I think we have an opportunity to see more diverse talent working on this new set of technology. But yeah, it's something that we are moving forward with as an industry.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic to hear that. Initially I thought, oh, because it's a new tech, it's actually very closed. But what you're saying is actually quite open because it's so new. So everyone is welcome and open to join, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Has this, in terms of moving forward, can you share your thoughts about some of the collaborations that you think between humans and maybe Gen AI? Like, we talk a bit about the future of work and creativity. Do you think that what we're doing is actually going to be, is it humans versus machines, or it's humans with machines, or maybe it's humanoids? I don't know. Like, what do you think?
um, I feel like we are becoming more productive, and as a result of that, we're going to have more room for new ideas and to be more creative. So I think the new set of technologies that we have at our fingertips is only going to help us be more creative, and it's going to give us more time to go and work on things that machines cannot work on. It's great that we can get rid of some repetitive tasks as well, that we may not exactly enjoy doing them. We can spend time on things that we are more passionate about.
Mm.
It's very interesting. I was talking to a CIO this week, and their opinion was that a year from now, even a year from now, we will be kind of laughing at the type of topics we're talking about in generative AI right now. It's such a fast growing environment, and it is going to change a lot of the ways that we are working right now. I look at it as a new opportunity. I don't feel like it's a competition between us and artificial intelligence. I feel like artificial intelligence is enabling us, if anything.
Okay, that's great. And do you think if there's like an impact for better or worse, how emerging tech and also Gen AI will have a more diverse communities? Will that affect a little bit more about the connection, or is that going to change any of the if there's any impact at all?
Yeah. So the very first thing I think about is that generative AI is going to help us have a more inclusive society, because we're going to use all of the speech to text, text to speech capabilities to open the collaboration up to people from different cultures who might be speaking different type of languages as well, and take that barrier away from people to talk and communicate with each other. And I also feel like machine learning and AI right now is becoming more accessible for a lot of people, specifically the minorities as well. And it's going to give them more power to be more helpful. And I think it's going to bring us together more. And I think it's going to make us a little bit more inclusive as a society. That's how I see it. We can check a year or a couple of years from now whether that has happened or not.
Yeah, I can't wait because I love to travel and I can't wait to have some kind of like translation device that would instantly give me real time and have real time conversation with someone when I go to a new country. How far away do you think that's going to be? you know?
Funny enough, we were in Europe a couple of months ago, and we had this train being cancelled, and we couldn't read anything on the board because it was all in another language.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of local people around, and they were trying to explain to us what had happened. they didn't know English. So we used this technology to communicate with each other. So
Yeah.
it's here right now. We can
Great.
already use it. And I think we were fairly effective in the communications that we had together, even though we didn't understand each other, which is amazing, right? It's bridging that gap.
Yeah. And were you using it like as in holding text, or was it more I don't know, like kind of like something you wear, or how were you communicating?
We were doing text to speech
Yeah.
and speech to text, just
Oh,
so, and we were translating in between, and we were
okay.
just literally just using Google for it.
Yeah.
Um, but like I know there are applications out there nowadays that would do that for
Yeah.
you. You don't really have to use Google for it, but
Mm. Well,
it's
you work
it's
at
becoming
Google,
more
so.
active. Well,
Yeah. Wow, that's good. I'm going on holiday soon, so I shall be using that. That's great. Um, and so you talked about how you were saying the things that it's not just 1 year away. It's like, but what about a little bit further than that? Do you have like, in your opinion, what would generative AI look like? Perhaps like, maybe one, maybe five. Can you even predict 10 years? Is that too far into the future? What are some of your thoughts about that?
I think in a year or 5 years from now, there will be a lot more trust in generative AI. And as an industry, I feel like we will solve a couple of challenges with large language models,
Mm,
such as hallucination, making sure they're very factual, things like that. I feel like we're going to solve that soon. So there will be a lot more trust in generative AI to be used in different types of use cases across different industries. There are industries who cannot be prone to mistakes. So they're very conscious of where they could use generative AI. I think that is one of the things that is going to change. There will be tasks that we kind of won't do anymore. So, for example, writing emails is already 10 times easier these days
yeah.
with the help of generative AI.
Yeah, I just tab and then it automatically writes for me.
That's it,
Yeah.
exactly. So I feel like there are some tasks that we will do less of, and that will open up space to do other things. I can't think of what that could look like in 1 or 5 years, and 10 years is just mind blowing for me. I don't know what 10 years from now looks like, but I hope I'm right and we go so far that it's hard to predict right now.
You think maybe something like the Jetsons will finally come true, maybe?
Maybe.
Flying cars and, nannies who are robots and all these things. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and I guess like, you're obviously a leader in this space. Apart from yourself, is there anyone else that you think is worth listening to or following that you think will give a really truthful, trustful opinion and advice about Gen AI? Which there's a lot of misinformation out there. That's why we're doing this podcast, is that we're trying to make sure we only have truthful things. But who do you think is worth listening to as well?
Yeah. So, like you say, there are heaps of podcasts these days talking about generative AI and how this industry is going forward. But there is one source of truth that I always rely on, and those are the courses by Andrew Ng. And the great thing about him is that he's been teaching machine learning and data science for years. Now he has started this piece just on generative AI.
Mm.
I think he's very easy to understand, and his courses are amazing as well. So that's one I would suggest people have a look at in case they want to get their hands dirty.
What's his name
Um,
again? Sorry.
Andrew Ng,
Okay.
yeah,
Put that in the show
he's
notes.
great.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
definitely want to do a course.
yes, me too. I mean, he has some interesting courses, and for anyone who wants to get started, even with machine learning, that's a great place to get started.
Okay, great. And what advice would you give to individuals who's potentially interested in pursuing a career in generative AI? It's a loaded question, but do you have any good advice for people wanting to get in?
Yeah, sure. I think It's a very interesting area. I think a couple of skills that you will need to have over time are prompt engineering. And by the way, engineering in prompt engineering is a little bit misleading, in my
Mm.
opinion. It's not exactly an engineering type. I
Yeah.
think it's a lot easier. It's an art rather than engineering. So
Is it
let's say
linguistics? I think it's more linguistics, isn't it?
it's all about the art of explaining what problem you're trying to solve
Yeah.
to a large language model.
Yeah.
So it's about how you explain your problem
Yeah.
so that you get the best output out of a large language model. I see a lot of people being challenged with that. So prompt
Mm.
engineering is the very first one I would
Mm.
touch on.
Mm-hmm.
I think a little bit of Python is something a lot of people know, and there are heaps of good courses available out there for free that people could get started on. The reason I say that is that you would usually build an application, and generative AI is going to be one part of it. If you were to build from scratch, obviously there are a lot of out of the box applications available for you as well. But if you're one who may want to build something and wants to have a career around it, you may want to know a little bit of Python and start thinking about how you could use different frameworks with large language models.
Mm.
I think these two are the top two that I would say you will need to know. The basics, the fundamentals of large language models. Again, there are heaps of really good content out there on the internet, but you can just have a look and learn the fundamentals
Mm.
before you go to the next stage.
Well, you made your career change yourself, and look at where you are now. So, congratulations, and thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed learning more about unpacking generative AI with you, but then also to get your insights, and to hear that. Oh my God, you had imposter syndrome. Like what, as well. But like, thank you for being open and honest and vulnerable with us. And if anyone wants to contact you, what's the best way?
Thank you, Lucy. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's been great to be able to talk about generative AI as a holistic kind of approach that has
Mm.
been introduced in our industry. Um, I'm always available on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to have a chat, if anyone wants to talk about a new challenge that they want to take on, if anyone just wants to talk about how they are progressing their career, I'm a huge fan of STEM as well. So let me know, hit me up. I'm more than happy to help.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Niram. That was fantastic. Um, Ask her to be a mentor. I think that's what you should do. I mean, don't ask, you don't get. You might get a flood of responses now. But thank you so much for your time. It's been really fantastic to learn more about generative AI. I'm pretty sure our conversation will move so fast that all of the things that we talked about will come true, and then even more. It is a very fast moving space, and so many things are happening. But thank you so much for unpacking generative AI with us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Lucy.
How incredible was Niram, and what do you think about her insights? Who would have thought that a machine learning cloud engineer will also experience imposter syndrome? I would love to hear your comments about this episode. For the next topic, we'll be unpacking the exciting world of 3D bioprinting, which will be using our own body cells and tissues to one day grow new human organs. This is cutting edge science and technology that's reshaping the future of medicine. For more information about the latest episodes, to learn more about each technology, and how you can contact us for sponsorship, promotion, and guest speaking collaborations, visit our website, emergingtechunpacked.com. Make sure to subscribe, like, and follow us on our social media channels and stay updated with the latest news. You can find me on LinkedIn searching for Lucy Lin. We welcome all feedback and will be very grateful if you can help us grow and spread the word by forwarding this episode to a friend and giving us a 5-star review. Thanks for your attention. I hope I've unpacked generative AI for you to gain a better overall understanding of this incredible new and emerging technology. See you in the next Emerging Tech Unpacked episode soon.